All right. Hello, everybody in the internet world. This is Gretchen Wagner with the Anti-Boring Approach to Powerful Studying, and I'm so excited to have our newest guest interview today with Beth Samuelson of Student Organizational Services. So hi, Beth.
Good morning. Hi, everybody.
Good morning. I also want to introduce all our listeners and watchers to Megan, who is my friendly assistant. If you'll wave, Megan.
Good morning.
Megan is going to be hanging out on the chat with you all and answering any technical difficulty questions and making sure that I am tracking any questions that you all have for me or Beth in the chat. So that should be on everyone's right-hand side. Please feel free to have conversations with each other while Beth and I are talking. The more interaction, the more you'll get out of it. And before we dive in, I just want to name that there may be a few little technical issues this morning, and Beth and I are both improvisers and will happily roll with the punches. But I just want to apologize in advance if anything shows up. The recording will be just fine. And you can catch up then if you miss something live right now. So, all that out of the way. Hi, Beth. Welcome. I'm so excited that you made the time to be with us.
No, I really appreciate your bringing me into this. I think it's a really cool way to get the word out to parents about how to support kids better, and your anti-boring approach is just right on the cutting edge of what everybody needs right now. So,
thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah.
And so everyone knows how Beth and I are connected. Beth is the very reason that the anti-boring approach would not have come into existence in the world, Beth, if you had not hired me on as an academic coach way back. I think we figured 6 years ago. So,
yes.
Gratitude.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so cool to have come full circle like this, and Gretchen was a rock star when she joined, and now she's got her own study skills practice and coaching business. So I'm glad to have been able to watch you evolve. It's been a pleasure, and I'm just, I like to be a part of the ride now. So thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, and in just a second, I want you to sort of tell everyone the thumbnail version of how you landed in academic coaching, which is now sort of this up-and-coming new field in education. And before you answer, I just want to ask folks as you're tuning in to please let us know in the chat who you are, where you are, if you're a parent or a student, and just a little bit about why you showed up today. That'd be fun to hear from you. So Beth, tell us, how did you land into academic coaching?
Well, my background is in teaching, and I did graduate work in what at the time was a up-and-coming area, which was cognitive development and individualizing instruction instead of this sort of one-size-fits-all approach to education. And so I went into teaching already thinking about the need to customize and how challenging that was in a classroom with many kids. And that there were kids with lots of different needs, and they weren't necessarily being met by the generic approach. So what I started to see in my work was kids that had smarts and ability that wasn't being effectively tapped into because they couldn't access the information, whether it was because they couldn't organize a binder effectively to present their ideas, or they couldn't figure out how to get everything into a planner so they'd forget to turn stuff in. So it looked like this kid wasn't on his game. And in the old days, we used to just call that lazy and tell the kid to just step up and handle it. And, unless you had significant learning disabilities, good luck to you, and, just manage your life. But of course, these seemingly quote-unquote insignificant problems were actually very significant and often meant the difference between a kid really excelling and running ahead and showing his stuff and completely crashing. So that became more and more compelling to me, so I started working one-on-one in different school settings. I was seeing it in high schools, middle schools, and so forth, and then I started working with an educational specialist in Southern California who remember said to me, my biggest demand, he said, I have all these kids coming in for help with college applications and SAT prep, but the biggest issue is kids lacking study strategies. And can you do something? Because clearly this needs to be addressed. So that's how that started, and then it just became a growing need, and the word executive functioning wasn't even out there yet. Nobody was talking about that. Nobody was talking about how teenage brains were different than kids' brains or different from adult brains. So all of that was to come, and even multiple learnings, multiple intelligences was just still, that we were still years away, a few years away from Howard Gardner's idea that there are different ways of being smart. So, we all saw this, and kind of it was like, I just feel like I stepped into the empty place, and then it became clear that people were really needing this kind of support. Schools weren't doing it too. I'm sorry, I meant to say that the schools were not teaching study strategies. When I was growing up, nobody taught you how to study. You sort of had to wing it and figure it out. Figure out how to manage your time, how to organize a binder, and good luck to you,
Would you say that schools are teaching it now?
I would say there's a lot more awareness about the necessity of it, and the understanding that people are less likely, teachers are less likely to jump on a kid for being apathetic or lazy. They're more likely to identify specific issues. They don't necessarily know how to address them. They don't necessarily have the capacity to address them, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, I was realizing as you gave your history, I'd actually never heard the early history before in all the time we've known each other. You interviewed me, but I never really heard your full story, so that was really fun.
Okay. It's a long time ago.
We've titled this talk "Wired for Chaos," and I would love for you to explain that a little bit. Like, what is special about the teenage brain, and what do you mean when you say "wired for chaos"?
Well, that title actually came up a long time ago when I was first putting together presentations. I was doing a presentation on the teenage brain. And I remember thinking, what's the best way to describe the teenage brain to a group of confused parents who are wondering why they don't know how to navigate the brain? And then I was remembering the old Doonesbury cartoon, which you probably don't. You're too young. You don't remember that. There was a great Doonesbury cartoon where he was wandering through the brain, trying to navigate his way through it. I thought put that Doonesbury cartoon together with the teen brain and a parent with like a pith helmet and a searchlight, and I could we need some navigation assistance here. So, and we need you to understand that it is kind of chaotic in there because that's the teen brain. Recent research has shown that teen brains are different than what we thought through MRI studies and through particularly work done by the NHI, a guy named Jay Giedd, Giedd, who did a lot of MRIs of brains and kind of analyzing how the frontal cortex was different. So more and more there was just a lot of information that showed the teen brain is not a fixed entity. Even at 16, 17, there's still wiring, pruning of connections, and everything from how kids experience emotions, how they perceive faces, how they deal with anger. They're more inclined to take risks, as we know. It's part of development. It's actually a good thing, though it's scary for parents. So it also means that kids don't yet necessarily have the skill set to regulate themselves when they're angry, upset, bored, stressed out, because they get flooded really easily. So those areas are kind of works in progress, and they are kind of wired, as you were, for chaos at that point, because there is not the history of knowing how to organize themselves, organize their feelings, organize their ideas, organize their materials. All of that is prefrontal cortex, which sadly for parents is not fully developed until you're about 27, 28 years old. So so even college students are wired for chaos, parents, I'm sorry to tell you. Yes, as many have discovered after the first year and come back and said, wow, I didn't know how to manage my time because there were bright, shiny objects out there on the campus that were more interesting than my schoolwork. So I think that's just a good description. For me, it's a good model for thinking about the idea that it's wired for chaos, that's how it's set up, that's the time period, that's the point of development, but it is not a fixed entity. It's still in process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that. I know there's so much more you could say, but that was a great quick synopsis.
Good.
And I would love to also, while we're kind of putting in some basic foundational information for parents before we dive into specific topics around procrastination and other issues, you brought up the phrase executive functions.
Right.
And I would, pretend that there are people in the audience don't know anything about what executive functions are, and give us a little primer.
Okay. My great happiness is that in 2014, I'm actually talking to a far more educated public about the brain and about executive functioning. When I started this work many years back, and I won't say how many because that forced me to disclose my age, which we don't have time to talk about that. But anyway, it's interesting to me that it's become such a buzzword now, and it's so much better understood. Executive functions our structures are really, well, I would say the prefrontal cortex of the brain is responsible for the functions that we call executive skills. And those would include attention, working memory, prioritizing, organization. That's organization of information and organization of materials as well. Follow through, being able to jumpstart, self-regulation, concentration, all of those, and there's more, but in general, those skill sets, as we know, are essential for success in the average school environment, because school is so much geared toward paperwork and turning things in and being on time and due dates and all of that. And the frontal lobes are a work in progress with teenagers, and as I mentioned earlier, the full development of that is not till you're in your late 20s. The best analogy I can think of is, imagine your prefrontal cortex is the control tower at the airport. And with a teenager, you've got an intern in the control tower. And you're trying to manage all these different things coming in, and they're scrambling, right? And we all know multitasking doesn't work very well. So, and then you've got an inexperienced youngster for whom they don't even yet have their full capacity for attention or working memory, for example, when they're in middle school. And yet the demands on those functions are pretty great all of a sudden, sometimes more than the acknowledged capacity. So your ability to harness your executive skills, to apply them to school, is essential for success. In many ways, I feel it has a lot more to do with success in school than IQ. Or you can have an incredibly high IQ and have very weak executive skills, for example. So
wow.
That could really hamper your success in school.
So I love your the image of that control tower with all of these airplanes like trying to land, and this like crazy intern that's just kind of like stressing out.
Totally.
And is super emotional, and maybe they just got a text that their boyfriend broke up with them or something like that, and they're trying to land all these planes. And one question that I've actually had that I haven't looked to see if there's any research out there about this, but I'm so curious about, like, let's just even say 20 years ago compared to now, would you say that there are more airplanes in the sky that need to be landed now than there were 20, 30 years ago for young people going through school?
Yes, I think there are far more demands. The curriculum demands are greater. The volume of work has been way anteed up in the school districts. Common Core is only going to exacerbate that, I think, for a multitude of reasons. And there are 12-year-olds now that are doing work that in our day and age would have been probably not given to you till you were in 9th grade or 10th grade. So suddenly you're being asked to call on a whole set of skills that may not, A, have ever been directly given to you, and B, you are simply developmentally just a work in progress with, being able to manage it. And so it can hit a kid hard. And it is a different world that we're dealing with. No question about it.
Well, and I'm thinking the other thing I'll add to our image of all these airplanes landing is all these papers fluttering in the sky. With the invention of the photocopier, I think, like, you know, when I was a kid, there was just not nearly the amount of paper that I had to track compared to what kids have to track now. And so even that alone is an added craziness. Like, you're trying to land these planes and you can't see the planes for the paper flying.
Yeah, that's a great visual. Yes, that's right. And online grade books have actually made everybody more anxious in some ways. So, you know, it's easy to go on there and say, oh, great, I can look and see what my kid's missing in terms of work. But, you know, often those grade books aren't even accurate. We don't know when they were updated. And it just makes people highly anxious because they can see it. So, and especially because parents feel they should be accessing it, whereas in the old days, you didn't have access to it until the report card came, for better or for worse. So just the level of anxiety in parents and the feeling that you should be doing more and doing a better job of an already complicated job of parenting. Now you should be managing your kids' schoolwork. You know, it's just hard. Yes, and there's a lot more of it to manage, and the assignments are harder.
Yeah. So let's actually stay right here for a second. I'm so glad you brought up online grade books. And what would you say? We have several parents in the audience. There are parents of rising 5th and 6th graders. There's parents of high school juniors and seniors. There's a sports psychologist who works with college athletes. There's a there's a Montessori teacher who is struggling with sort of the 21st century challenges of teaching kids now with all this technology. So, but knowing that's the audience, let's also stick with the idea of grade books. And what would be best practices that you would give parents for managing their anxiety and working with the grade book?
Well, I think first of all we have to understand the limitations of those grade books. I want to start with that because in many cases the grade books are not updated on a consistent, regular basis by teachers. So what the parents see on there is not an accurate representation of what's actually been submitted. For example, homework-wise, that would be a main reason why parents are going on there is to look at if there's missing homework. So I think it can be deceptive. I think it can be misleading, and it can cause parents to get upset with kids or start getting on them about work not getting in when in fact the work has been submitted or the teacher just hasn't gotten to it yet. So it has to be, the information on there has to be taken with a grain of salt. I think you have to, is this really accurate? You know, and go in it that way. I don't think parents of the average kid should be hanging out on there on a regular basis. I think it's invasive, and I think it shows mistrust, and it also is it shows a lot of enmeshment that can be disabling to kids. You know, why are you managing my schoolwork? I'm trying to be independent with this, and you're going in and checking me and telling me what I've got missing. Particularly with older students. You know, kids, you're talking about kids that are going to be transitioning to college soon. You can't check their grade book in college, and it's not a good practice to be doing it with a 16-year-old. Younger kids, middle school kids who are struggling with that, if it's done properly, it can be effective, at least if it's done collaboratively and not punitively. Problem is that parents usually go in there and freak out and then blow up. Now, where is this? Why hasn't this been turned in? Of course, why questions, as we know, are not really questions looking for information. They're accusations. You know, you're really saying you didn't turn this in, and you're, you know, calling into question my parenting skills here. That's really what that's about. And if I had trained you better, you wouldn't be in this boat. And oh my God, I need to go back to Dr. Spock or back to somebody and go figure this out. So it's really, parents do it a lot, and it makes, I think it worries because it calls into question their own ability to control the situation, and parents increasingly feel out of control with teenagers, and so that feels like a place to control. So
how often, like, I know every teenager is different, every family is different, so I know that what I'm about to ask you is in some ways not fair, but if there's a general rule, like check the online grade book no more than X times per Y, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, I would say kids should be checking it regularly, and that should be part of their routine. So a kid should be checking the grade book maybe once or twice a week. and jotting down what's missing and following up. The real skill here is developing self-advocacy with kids and having and independence in pulling off what's missing and taking charge of that. Now, that's easier said on average with the average 17-year-old than it is with a 12-year-old. I understand that. And you've got kids that have learning disabilities, executive function, real significant challenges, and following and tracking work is just one of them. So you have to customize that for kids. But for the average kid who doesn't have significant disabilities, I think a parent going on with a middle school kid once a week is enough. With a high school kid, I would be very circumspect and careful unless there's been a history of issues, as there can be with kids with ADHD and organizational problems, and then have it come to an agreement with the kid. Look at it with the kid together. Don't do it by yourself and then freak out on the kid. That is really one of the important recommendations. So that it's collaborative. You know, so if you were my guest, Gretchen, why don't we sit down and have a look at the grade book? I want you, go through and it'd be a good idea to note down what you're missing. So, but I'm doing that more as a way to help you recognize what you have to take care of than my using it as a way to quell my anxiety or exacerbate my anxiety and then run after you to fix it. So you're trying to train kids to be autonomous around this.
Yeah, so I think it's a great rule of thumb for parents never to go on the grade book by yourselves without your kid.
Do not go on grade books by yourself. Yes, right. It's the kid's grade book, really. Yeah. There are parents there.
I was thinking about how much kids are on Facebook and other online things, and I talk about what I call the technology twitch. Like, I'm on Facebook before I realize I'm on Facebook. Like, it's a twitch.
Right.
And I think some parents have the online grade book that way, and I just thought, there can be rules. Like, maybe you set on the computers, you have little rules around how many minutes are allowed in Facebook and how many minutes are allowed in the online grade book, and you kind of support each other around managing your technology twitch.
That's right. And you do it as a partnership, not as so that it's imposed on the kid and then used as a way of punishing. That's not helpful. Or, what is this? So I think kids, you've got a tracking method now, and for kids that really need that, it can be very beneficial, barring what I said earlier about being careful, of teachers not updating it regularly and not being totally accurate. You have to factor that in. But in a day and age when kids are not using planners as much or as effective at it, or they're trying to use their phone and the phone isn't really designed well to lay out projects or lay out due dates in a way that it could be. Somebody out there needs to develop a really good app. That would be great. But in the meantime, yeah, I think it is a good collaborative activity.
Well, and speaking of planners, would you say that the planner is kind of the center of all these executive functions that we've been talking about? Is that kind of like the one central tool? I wish I knew my computer terms, like the central operating system, maybe?
Yeah, the OS for there you go. I'm a big fan of planners, and some of our coaches still use handwritten planners even. They're the thing that they can do for a kid is make a visual that's easy to access. You don't have to log in, or you can always get it, and it allows you to break things down also over the course of a week or 2 weeks in a way that is very difficult to do on a phone. It's just not designed for that. So while a phone can set up reminder systems, I'd like to see a kid put in reminder, check planner for directions, let the phone buzz you to go look at the planner, and then check the planner for the details. I think that's a better setup, but I'm a big fan of planners. And I think the planners should be straightforward. You and I have many times talked about this. Some of the high school planners are not really, they're wired for chaos. They are set up so poorly. You got this, what is it? It's September 5th is one box that's, as big as a postage stamp, with 2/3 of it is taken up with the school sports schedule in it. And then the kid is supposed to write down everything in there. So that's not going to work for a lot of kids. So it's nice to customize yourself. Go buy your own planner. They're still out there. There's ways to get planners online. You can create your own setup. You can create templates and hole punch them and put them in a folder. You don't have to be wedded to the old-fashioned planner, but kids need to think in that way, and creating a system is critical. Yes.
Well, and as you know from when I was coaching with you, I started really suggesting to many of my clients that they have one system. This is my collage at the front of the system, but where the planner goes right at the beginning of it.
Yes.
And I've actually started, this is one that I've designed that I'm still working on with the designer. But
and Gretchen, I love that, because look at what I want everybody to see. That. Can you hold that up again? Hold it up again. That's so good. Okay, see everybody, so you can see there's a due dates thing, and then there's it's a very visually clean, easy to access, their to-do list on the bottom. It's just so much easier. I think you can see why a phone cannot replicate this. And so for many kids, and there are kids that are visual learners, they are stronger visual. They need to see things laid out. Hearing it is not the best way of storing it or remembering it. So we also remember things better. Working memory is more effective when it's accessed in multiple modalities. So hear it, write it, see it, color it, whatever works.
And isn't there more and more research about how writing with your actual hand versus typing interacts with working memory differently too?
Yes, I just sent, God, I don't know if you saw that article, but I just posted, I did post it, I sent it out to some of my colleagues, that there's surprising research that the handwriting is actually making students better able to remember, for example, information from a lecture in college. Who would have thought, right? We have laptops, we should be typing everything, it's faster. But there's something about that physical act of writing that allows people to remember things better. I remember writing stuff down and not necessarily looking at all those notes verbatim again in the same way, but the fact of writing it, I remembered it. And it's just, that's a cool, it's a cool tool, as it were.
So I'm realizing, because Google Hangout is so weird, that people couldn't really see it because you were talking, so you were visible. So I'm just going to talk here for a little second so that the screen stays big so that people can see that here's the due date section that Beth was pointing out, and then here's the to-do list. And I'm a big fan, and I'd be curious to hear what you have to say, Beth. I'm a big fan about having students write their due dates on the day they're due and not on the day they're assigned.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah, I see kids, there's too much gymnastics that happen, brain, like planning gymnastics, when you write it on the day that it's assigned. And yet every single middle school planner in this whole entire country has that as the process, where they write it on the day that it's assigned.
And it's not helpful. It should be written. You should think ahead. And kids should be also taught to take something like a test that's coming up, put that test on the date that it's happening in the planner, and then break down the study process the entire period before that. Actual to-do items. I need to do the vocab cards online on, whatever it is. It can be an online price. It doesn't matter. But that process of using that visual, that tool, is so much more effective. And you don't have to log on to a planner. You don't have to pull it out in class and get yelled at because you're not supposed to be on your phone. You can, there it is. It's easy to access. So yes, I'm a big fan. And that version that you have, I think, is really telling, because it's straightforward. It's to-dos and it's due dates. That's it. There's no cute little quips in there. There's no cartoons. There's no sports schedule. It's just straight up a tool. Now that can be made. You could make a template like that. Anybody can make that on a Google Doc very easily, and print those out and put them in a folder. That's fine. And I love the idea of kids who are so tech savvy creating their own version of that. So maybe it's like the one that you held up. Maybe for a kid with dysgraphia, those boxes would be too small. So you'd want to have more space. So how could we lay that out so that kid is able to use that, and still get the benefits from it?
And for this school year, I'll be making mine available on my website. So if people want to have it, I can email a PDF to you, and you just need to go to GretchenWegner.com and sign up for the newsletter, and then it will be a part of one of the free things that I offer people. So if you want that, feel free to do that. Now, a question just came in from Sam, and so now we're getting into the nitty-gritty, Beth, because Sam says that the planners are a great visual, but they are valuable only when the kids execute what is in the planner.
Yes.
And when kids have executive function issues, how do you make them execute what's in the planner? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how old this kid is, Sam, but
Sam is a parent of a rising senior.
A rising senior. Okay, well, that's going to change my answer slightly. Okay.
Well, give both, though. Give both, because we have families of younger students.
No, I'll address both. So, in general, things need to get out of the planner and into reality. They need to be actualized, right? So, one of the tools that you can use to do that is to have, I'm a very big fan of having whiteboards in kids' rooms, and part of the routine is going in, opening up your planner. It doesn't need to be a giant whiteboard. It can be a small one on the door. And you open your planner up, and if you haven't got everything in there, you check online to see what you missed or whatever to make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row. Then take the to-do list and put it up where you can see it when you're in your room. And what's nice about that is that then you can do that task of prioritizing. So what's the big ticket item? What do I have to take care of right away? What's a step I was going to take in handling a long-term assignment? So, well, I've got to get this worksheet in tomorrow for my chem class. That has to be done. But I've also got a chem test coming up, and I want to start preparing for that. So, well, and Sam's kid, for example, this year going to have college to deal with. So I've got to deal with my application. So I need to start working on it. So all these processes, if you will, have to get broken down into incremental tasks and then put on board and then identified priority-wise and then assigned a time to do it. And, yeah, so that's critical. So, and then there should be a system to check off when things are complete and cross off or something similar or erase whatever when it's actually in the binder and in the backpack. So there's a couple stages there. The task has to be done. It has to be printed off or stuck in or emailed or put in the backpack. Younger kids need more assistance generally in actually coming up with a system and implementing it on a regular basis. But the nice thing about younger kids is they're often they don't have long-term habits that are ingrained, and they're more excited about cute little tools and things. I found, like, for example, my 6th graders are completely mad about new ideas and new strategies, whereas the 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds have often been doing stuff for a long time, not necessarily efficiently, and they're a bit of an old dog needing to be taught a new trick. And at the same time, they really want their parents out of their face. So that's a hard place to be. If you have a collaborative relationship with your 17, 18-year-old, and you can come at it with a suggestion, have you thought of, or what about this, or what works for you, rather than you need to, or why don't you, or I'm going to get you. So you see, some of that is communication too. It's packaging what your interest is. So you got to, if you want to sell an idea, you got to think about who your target audience is. As a parent, your target audience is a recalcitrant 18-year-old who doesn't want to listen to you. What's the best way to package that? Even if it's a good idea, it may not be well received. So it's a couple challenges in there.
Well, and I want to add that sometimes I think we as parents, and then I'm not a parent, but I'm a coach, have really huge expectations for kids. And even if this rising senior learned to follow through on just one of the many items that you mentioned there, even if he or she develops a habit of just like writing a to-do list on the whiteboard every day,
Perfect.
Even if maybe the checking off every item doesn't necessarily happen as regularly as we like, that is a huge achievement. And getting good at even one small skill is building a neural pathway for more organization, and then it will be a great foundation when it's ready to build sort of the next organizational skill. And that might not come for 2 or 3 years or 2 or 3 months.
Right.
And that's okay, that it's going to be glacially slow in many cases, and we have to just, as you said earlier, manage our anxiety around it.
Yes. Parents need to be patient with cognitive development in kids, and the rate in which kids develop is all across the board. Even though there are sort of traditional, typical milestones, like working memory is supposedly fully matured by the time you're 17, for example. Well, that doesn't mean that that's the case with everybody, and it certainly doesn't mean that there's not going to be discrepancies. And also for kids that have working memory problems connected with a learning disability, you're going to see weaknesses in that area. And their ability to jumpstart tactics or techniques is not going to be as great necessarily as you, the parent, would hope. You know, we're all adults are looking for increasing autonomy in teenagers. Sometimes we expect it too early. We're looking for a 12-year-old to know how to jumpstart homework and motivate themselves. We're looking for the 18-year-old to start the college, you know, organization process, planning everything out and breaking it down with ease, with no support. You know, all this is back to my early training, where, you know, the idea that cognitive development is it's individualized, and we cannot have a blanket expectation for everybody. We have to give different give allowances for different temperaments and different brains, and be able to have patience with that. And if you can't do it as the parent, if you lose your patience, your kid doesn't want, then at least get somebody else to do that with the kid, to partner with your kid who needs it. Whether it's a family friend, a relative, the neighbor, an older student, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, that it's somebody else other than you, so you're not getting too anxious.
Well, and I love your suggestion for that, Beth, because I was also going to add that, from my perspective, if nothing else, build in the ability to create routine around organization. Even if what you do in the midst of that 5 minutes is a little messy, the fact that you are getting in the habit of coming in from school and spending 5 minutes organizing yourself and your whiteboard and all of that, yeah, that alone, like just being able to establish a ritual and to know how to do that, is setting kids up for so much success when they go off by themselves.
Yes, because then you've got an 18-year-old alone in a dorm room who has had experience already doing that. You know, he's gotten himself up in the morning. He's planned his own day. He's broken down assignments. He's put stuff up on the board. He's starting to learn how to manage his own time and prioritize. You know, I get nervous when I hear parents, for example, talk about time management and planning. Got parents who are still waking their seniors up to go to school in the morning. Now, that's really, I have to say, that's probably not the best idea anymore. Kids have to start getting themselves up and getting to school. So, but that's just a small piece of letting go of the control. And if your goal is autonomy, you know, then, you know, you don't want a failure to launch. You know, you want a good launch and a solid launch. And that launch has to come, that successful launch comes from having spent time building the skills needed to have, you know, to have autonomy in college that actually is, you know, workable, and that you're efficient and the kid is successful in the transition.
I'm going to just throw into the chat a link for a TED Talk that I absolutely love, and it's about how to develop something called a tiny habit. And I find that this tiny habit process is the best I found in my own personal life, and also in my coaching, I'm working with students to develop tiny habits for themselves. And it's a great way to start establishing those rituals for working with your planner. So that's just in there for folks to look at later. But Ellie is saying that for her 5th grader, she has sort of the same question about this planner issue. But what do you do for the younger students when they come home without what they need written in the planner in the first place?
Yeah, that's a problem with I mean, if it's an ongoing problem, first of all, I don't know. So how old was this particular student? Is this 5th grade?
I think either rising 5th or rising 6th.
Okay. Yeah, well, that ability to plan and know what you have to do for upper elementary school students is essential, and it is probably the most important skill to transition into middle school and certainly into high school, where everything really matters. So I would want to know where the breakdown is happening. For example, I've had teachers that were primarily verbal in their delivery of information. So it's the end of the class, there's a lot of chaos, the bell rang, the teacher is talking at the kids and saying, you need to make sure to do this, this, and this, and don't forget that, and be sure to write it down, or did you get it down? And the kid did not and leaves school and doesn't have what they need to complete the work at home, or has a partial directive. I need to do my book report. Well, clearly I'm not supposed to do the whole thing tonight. Am I supposed to do part of it? So they miss directions. They miss pieces of directions. So if you've got kids that are missing work, I'm guessing that the modality in which the information is being delivered in the classroom may be at odds with the kid's way of taking in information and encoding it and holding on to it. So with a fifth grader, a conversation with the teacher or teachers is really important. You know, I would go to you, Gretchen, and say, if you were my kid's core teacher, I would say, can you make sure, I'm going to use my daughter's name in here, can you make sure that Hannah has her work down before she leaves the classroom? Because what I'm seeing is she's getting home, and I think your delivery of the information and her recording it is not happening. I think we need to make sure she's getting it. Could you sign her planner, please, each day? Or could there be another grown-up who could do that? So that habit is getting embedded early on, and the teacher is a partner with you. That's a much easier thing to do when you've got a 10-year-old than when you've got an 18-year-old. So starting that early, you know. And I would actually ask the kid, how does the teacher give information? Is it on the board? Sometimes.
And actually, Ellie did just pipe into the chat saying that in her situation, information was written on the board for an entire week. So it was right there, and it's just that her son failed to get it down.
Well, yeah, exactly. And there's another thing. Something that's on the board for a long period of time could start looking like the wallpaper in your house. Like you just ignore it.
That's true.
You know, it doesn't hold anything to you. It's not flashing yellow lights and saying, write me down, you're going to need me. It's just up there. So unless somebody taps him on the shoulder and directs him to get it down, he may just, you know, blow it off because it's not holding his attention. I've seen that happen where if there's not the specific directive to the student with the tap on the shoulder and the opening of the planner, they don't get it. Because maybe when the directive happened, the teacher said, be sure and get this down, that was followed by something else and then something else, and he didn't hold on to the directive. So that's when the information on the board became wallpaper. And after a few days, he just ignored it. So I think getting a collaborative approach here is really important so your son, Ellie, can start attending to that much-needed skill of recording the information.
It just occurred to me that teachers could have a little small group, like gamify something, where you get a point for a little gold coin for for every piece of that's on the board that you have in your planner.
Right. Wouldn't
and
that
then
be
the kids could be helping each other.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're not teachers.
No, I know.
Sometimes
well, we always have great ideas, but I don't have 25 kids in a class, and I know it's challenging. It's hard.
Yeah. So I want to get straight to this issue of procrastination now that we've talked about tools.
Yep.
And I'm going to read an email that Allison sent me in its entirety because I think it's so great, and I think so many parents will resonate.
Great. Okay.
My kids have been rewarded for procrastination over and over again, she says. They usually get by and often do quite well with minimal last-minute effort. Last night, my teen was prepping notes for an open book final at midnight. He has plenty of time on his hands, and despite many suggestions and prompts from Mom, he chose to stay up late to do work he'd insisted earlier wasn't necessary. I think that's important. He stayed up late to do work he'd insisted earlier wasn't necessary. But he thinks he got an A, and he's probably right, so should I just shut up and back away? You know, my concern is that his big brother, who's now in college, got away with similar procrastination techniques, often not studying at all, and then totally hit the wall at UC Berkeley. And I happen to know about that situation because I coached him when he hit the wall. And so this mom is trying to save his younger brother from a similar fate. But what do you do about that kind of procrastination in older kiddos?
Yeah, I think, well, that's the key is older kids. This is a 16-year-old, is that right? I'm trying to remember, was it 16 or 17?
Yeah, he's like about to be a junior, I think.
Yeah. You know, it is a challenge because some of that procrastination comes from prioritizing other things that are less important probably, but more engaging, and the student gets to those first. and then puts off the other stuff. You and I were just talking about that article that came out about how we end up doing a lot of small things and thinking we're getting things done, like we're answering emails, or in the case of a teenager, responding to text messages as they come in, or small things that are not accomplishing the big goals. And then there's that oh my God moment when it's 11 o'clock at night and you suddenly have that epiphany that there's 5 things you were supposed to do for this project that you didn't take care of. So, it's an executive skill, this piece about planning ahead, having the big picture. What are the steps that are needed? Writing them down. I think it's interesting she used the word rewarded for, he's obviously smart enough to, at the moment, he's been smart enough to get by on what he's processing and what he's doing. I'm of the mind, and I know you and I don't totally have the same answer to this question, but I think I'm of the mind that, a parent of a kid this age should not be telling a kid how to set up a study schedule or laying it out. I think they can set boundaries and rules still. So one of those would be the cell phone doesn't belong in the room. The cell phone needs to come out. I don't know if that's what's interfering, but I'd be interested to know. There's something going on.
Games. He prioritizes computer games. She just typed in that.
Thank you so much. All right. Yeah. So the computer games need to be turned off or taken out of the room, and if wherever or whatever space he's in. So, and I think it is okay for a parent to simply say that the computer games are shut off during this time. The computer is out of the room. A lot of kids will say they need the computer when in fact they really don't, as much as they say they do. They need it to check their homework, maybe to go on Google Drive and access documents that are getting shared or a paper they're working on. You don't generally need it for chemistry or for math. Often you don't need it for U.S. history. So I think it needs to be apportioned. I need to be on the computer for this amount of time. I don't for this amount of time. So either take the computer out of the room or he should move to a different space where he's not going to be distracted by that. Because that procrastination for this kid sounds like it has everything to do with video games and internet stuff. So I think that's what's pulling him off. He's got the bright shining object is a video game, and his work's not getting done. So I do think parents, while they have the ability to do so, can set limits on the use of computer and phone. And that has been a huge boon for kids in being able to get themselves back on track, actually. And they don't generally resent it. As long as it's a conversation that's thoughtful and collaborative, and it's done with an observation, and it's done preemptively and not punitively, as in, let's sit down before the school year starts and have a chat about what happened last year. Here's what I'm seeing. What I saw is that you ended up staying up late so often, scrambling to get work done. You cut into your sleep, which worries me, so there's the feeling of concern. And you're getting sucked into video games, which I understand it's more interesting than chemistry, for example. So we need a plan of action so this doesn't happen this year, because it's concerning me.
And Allison's saying that he also insists he has nothing to work on. And so I think that's, I get that too often with my coaching clients. Oh, but I didn't have anything to work on. But then he realizes late at night he probably does have something to work on. And I'm guessing that is because the computer games are such a lure. It's like, he hasn't really taken planning time. Like, he hasn't really had a planning ritual.
That's right.
That he has done to figure out.
I think you hit it. You hit the nail on the head. There's no planning ritual there. I don't know if maybe Allison, you could say he's jumping onto video games as soon as he gets home, and he's kind of caught up in that world, and then he's not. He's having the OMG moment where he's scrambling at the last minute to pull everything together, where before hitting any computer or any video game, there should be, as Gretchen's saying, that planning piece happening. Let's think through what I have. Well, right now it doesn't look like I have homework due tomorrow. A lot of times this is where kids fall apart. I have nothing due tomorrow. I hear that even in my coaching sessions with my students. I'm on top of everything. Everything's great. And then you dig deeper. You put on your Sherlock Holmes hat and you do a little detective work and you discover there's a project coming up. There's a paper due. There's a test coming. It's not an immediate concrete due date, but it needs planning for it, and it needs thought. So that's what's missing. I want to make sure all parents know about software that you can install, that kids can install. I'm having teenagers do this themselves to block websites that they tend to go on. Now, obviously, a video game can't get blocked in the same way. It's not a website, but There's one piece of software called self-control, and the kids install it. And let's say I'm on Hulu a lot and Netflix. I can turn those off for a certain amount of time and then get back on. But also, you're not obligated to keep a computer in the kid's room. Let me be clear on that. So the parents start thinking cell phones and computers need to be in kids' rooms, and they really don't. And I feel real.
Well, and Allison just piped up and said, "Aha, the planning ritual. Okay, I think that's it."
Yes.
So, and I just, as a person, as a human being in a body in this 21st century, I know I have this problem. I often come home and think, oh, I have nothing to do, and what I really want is to watch So You Think You Can Dance on TV, and so I go watch So You Think You Can Dance, and then I get tired, and then at the end of the day, it's like, oh God, wait, there was that email I was supposed to write to that person, and it's my lack of taking time to simply sit, take a few deep breaths, tune into my body, tune into my environment, not just be in my habitual desire to watch my TV show.
Right.
Write a few things on a list, and then I can make a better plan about when I'm going to write the email and when I'm going to watch my beloved TV show.
Well, and I think there's a reality too. I love that you talked about, that you came home and wanted to watch your show. I think sometimes you just want to come home and watch your show. You want to unplug. You've been in school all day attending to adults don't have to do this. We're not sitting around all day listening to, I have 50 minutes of chem, now I have 50 minutes of Great Expectations, now I have 50 minutes of Algebra 2, now I have 50 minutes of French. By the end of the day, your brain and your attention span, you just feel weary and you want to shut off. And the inclination for all of us, my inclination is not to come home and figure out my taxes. My inclination is to come home and decompress and read the novel that's on my bedside table, or, whatever it is, do the fun thing. So part of the planning ritual for kids is learning how to take the time, short as it is, to break stuff down and build in the fun time, to watch You Think You Can Dance, or to read your favorite book. Make that happen as part of the schedule. One thing I want to make sure I talk about is the Sunday ritual that I think is really helpful for the family, which is to have families sit down on a Sunday evening before the start of the week, pull out your planners, your phones. What's everybody got going on that week? What's coming up? Does your kid need to be somewhere? Does a library book need to get taken out from the public library? Does he need to go to somebody's house to work on a project? Did you book an appointment for him that he doesn't know about? To teach time management, part of it is modeling time management and making kids also hold their own appointments in their planners and their phones. Don't spring that you're going to see your academic coach, at 3:30 that day for the first time, and when you didn't tell the kid, 2 days before or a week before. So practice what you preach and get everybody together and lay it out so there's no, oh my God, I have a project coming up. Can you go to the store and get some supplies for me? It's 10 o'clock at night. No, I found that out on Sunday. Well, that's good that I know that, because I'm not available at 24/7 to drive you around or to go get supplies for you. So, or I've had other situations where families planned weekends away, and there's a big exam on Monday. So these things families need to communicate about. Everybody's got their own time commitments and scheduling challenges, so everybody should be collaborating on this as a team, because you're working as a team.
I've been, one of my other guest experts was Julie, who's a parent coach, and during our interview, she mentioned, and we actually are going to do this, have a brief little training in the fall called the anti-boring approach to the family meeting, about how to encourage families to really sit down and take that meeting, because you actually, as someone who trained me into this field, mentioned that, and I now mention that idea to many of my clients, and most of them don't take me up on it. It's the single hardest thing I've noticed for families to implement is their own planning ritual together. And so I just always want to point that out, that if you as a family are having a hard time finding 15 minutes to sit down, everyone with their planner out, everyone doing what they need to do, then no wonder the teenagers are struggling on their own.
Yeah, if the parents are stressed out and scrambling and operating by the seat of their pants with life, as we all do on occasion, then it is tough to pull that together. But it is so, for everybody's peace of mind, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and stuff's going to happen during the week, and other events are going to come in. Life happens, but at least if 10 or 15 minutes, everybody's kind of in the same place and knows what's going on, that's helpful. If you book a dentist appointment for your kid, set it up so you can email the invitation to the appointment through Outlook or through your Mac system, whatever it is, so that the kid has that on their calendar and knows where they have to be. I am a big, big fan of kids being part of the planning process that you have as a family. Huge. So glad to hear that you're incorporating those. I wonder why it's tough. It's interesting that parents find it tough to make that time to sit down. Maybe it's just over dinner could be done, or after dinner. Or let's do it just 10 minutes. What's everybody got?
Well, and that's the whole premise of this tiny habit that I put the video link in. Is the premise is take something that you already know how to do. Uh-oh, did I get lost? I think something. Anyway, I'm going to keep on talking and hope that it's okay. The tiny habit is attaching a habit, something you already do, like dinner together, to another thing.
Yes.
So I think that's an important thing to do.
Exactly. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Are you connected?
You hear me. I'm glad.
Okay.
So we could talk for so long, and there are 4 minutes left in the hour, and I want to make sure to get to a question that a young woman in my anti-boring summer program called, her name is Kelsey, wrote. She said, I for some reason feel lazy at some time in the middle of the school year, and I just don't feel the need to study, and I really need some help making myself devoted to studying harder. So what do we do to maintain the momentum that we start the school year with?
Well, I think first is to be more accepting of your own ups and downs and peaks and valleys. I would say to Kelsey, that's normal. I think people do flatline at a certain point. I mean, you get on overload. We've talked about the fact that at the beginning of the year, in the first quarter or first trimester, everything's novel. It's exciting. It's interesting. New teachers, new school, new information, new activities. And then people can hit a lull, and sometimes this happens in the middle of winter. It's not uncommon. There's that second semester slump or that post-holiday slump where everybody just sort of flatlines and says, I'm just so done with this, And I think it's okay. You can't keep the same level of motivation, Kelsey, all the time. It's just not realistic. Nobody can. None of us do. So you can just say, you know what, I'm not so thrilled about this. But I know I have to do it. So again, back to the planning routine. Okay, so now I'm just going to put myself on an autopilot. I'm not going to do it because I love it or because I'm psyched about it. I just know that I have to. It's one of those to-dos. You mentioned that she said, I want to study harder. Was that it? I want to make myself study harder.
More devoted to studying harder.
More devoted to studying harder. Well, giving yourself the directive to study harder is kind of vague. And it's a hard thing to study harder when you don't have specifics about what that means. It just sounds like a little bit punitive on yourself. I need to get on that, or I'm a bad person because I'm taking it easy. Well, I don't know if it's studying harder. Maybe what does that mean for yourself? See if you can turn that into concrete actions you can take. So that study harder turns into, I am going to take more time taking some notes on the novel that I have assigned for that class. I'm going to actually take notes on that. Or I am going to make sure I do a summary sheet at the end of my biology chapter so I have the key concepts written down because final exams are coming. See also if you can set a new goal or two goals for yourself and then have the actions fit the goals that you've set for yourself. Sometimes even just recalibrating goals can kind of re-energize us and re-motivate us. So I think that would be, and be kind and be gentle to yourself, and don't expect yourself to operate at the same level of intensity, 24/7, because none of us can do that.
Now, the opposite is also a problem, Allison says in the chat, and that her son, once grades start coming in, he kicks into gear and gets motivated by grades, but at the beginning of the year, he just has a really hard time keeping track of his assignments, getting his reading done, and so she's wondering, what can happen to kick off the semester on the right foot.
Okay, and this is a kid is he a rising senior? I'm trying to remember.
He's a junior.
He's a junior, okay.
Upper high school. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think grades are motivating for some kids, and that's true. I've seen that with my clients too, that once they get the grades and they have that aha, or that really good feeling of getting A's, the reinforcement of looking on the grade book and things are looking good, or the, oh no, things are not looking so great, that kind of back and forth. So I think, Allison, it's sort of back to he just has to do it, because junior year is a tough year anyway. It's just so demanding. And have him look at when the progress reports are coming out. What's the date of that? When is he first going to get his grades for the term? And have him set a goal for himself. Again, it's circling back to that goal idea. What am I working towards? What do I want to improve upon? Maybe it's my homework track record. Maybe it's, my science grades or my humanities grades, whatever it is, have always been a little on the lower side. Maybe my goal this year is to go from a B- to a B+ in English. I'd like to have that. So I think having a path, having a direction for yourself, a map, if you will, with an endpoint is really useful in that respect. That's where I would go with it. I don't know, Gretchen, you may have something to add on that, but that's my thought.
Yeah, I think getting those planning rituals up and trying to find a way to, I'm big with gamifying, like how can things be turned into a game. And there's actually, Allison is in the anti-boring approach, so you guys will see when you get into the unit on the power of taking action, there is a game, an online game that I post that's actually a role-playing game for your habits. And I found some students get motivated by earning gold coins, and sometimes that's what will work.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and we should add, since we're both coaches, oh, go ahead.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to run over you. I was just going to say that for one of the biggest complaints, I'm going to put the word complaints in quotes, but is about middle school boys and their lack of motivation. We've all heard that. Any of us who do coaching, and parents, I'm sure experience that if you have a middle school boy in particular. Not to gender specify, because it happens with girls too, but it's the middle school age in general can be tough with motivation. And any of us in this business always talk about this. Well, how do I motivate him? How do I get him to do that? I think the turning things into reward systems at that age for some of those kids can be very helpful. We had a student, a 12-year-old, who his mother was really on him about turning grades in and turning his grades over and improving his grades, and why didn't he care, and he needed to make sure to get stuff in, and all he really wanted to do was, circling back to Sam, so play video games. He wanted to play video games. So our SOS coach set up a reward system for him that allowed him, if he had completed a certain amount of, and she did it with him. She didn't make it for him. They did it together. He had great ideas about it, so he created his own motivation. But if I do this, I am rewarded by game time. And his parents were very excited about it, and someone else had created it with him, and so it ran. And the work started coming in. So if that's what it takes, and I wouldn't do it with money. I wouldn't pay kids for grades. I'm really against that. But I think playing with this, making this, if you do this, you get extra free time for the fun thing you like doing, that makes a whole lot of sense. And that's real. That's real for adults, too. We get the stuff done we don't want to do, and we have more time to do things we do want to do. So I think that's a good tone also. I hope that answers the question a little bit.
I'm sure it does a little bit, and I'm sure, as with these issues, I know in my own coaching that it takes time, and I feel like one of the biggest skills we can help our kids with is helping them troubleshoot their own behaviors and help them. I'm constantly, as an adult, needing to create new systems as the world changes,
right.
And so I'm so grateful that I have that ability to monitor my own behavior, notice when I'm having trouble trying a new system, sticking with a new system long enough to see if it truly is successful or not, trying something new, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's one of the most important skills we can give our kiddos.
I agree, and I think recalibrating techniques and routines and patterns that don't work, and parents observing that and saying, without being judgmental. I think parents, part of the job here is to pull back on the judgment, really thinking about the wording that you're using, and instead make observations. I'm seeing that, or it looks like you're struggling to get yourself jump-started. Not I wish, or not why don't you, or you need to, but I'm seeing that, or what can I do to help you rethink this system? So, but it can't be about you. It's got to be that you're guiding and mentoring this newly adolescent child or your older teenager into the next stage of their life. And if you are not the best position to do it anymore, as I said earlier, bring somebody else in who's objective, who's not going to judge, who's not a parent. It's just easier sometimes not being a parent and assisting kids with these skills, which is why SOS for students and why Gretchen's service exists, because having other adults doing this is just more effective often.
And I think that's a great way for us to go out here. And, you know, if paying for a coach doesn't work for you, there are so many ways to engage loving adults who are already in your community, at your church, in your neighborhood. I have a program that would help your child and that loving adult walk through the semester together. You could do it with your kid, although I'm not sure that that's necessarily the best thing. Or you can engage coaches. Beth is actually, will you tell everyone a little bit about where you're geographically located and also about your Skype service, and then we'll be done after that.
Absolutely. So our company is called SOS for Students. That's SOS the number 4 students, and website is sosforstudents.com. We have an office in Walnut Creek on the Lafayette border, and we have an office in Montclair Village in Oakland, and we're on 2 school sites. We offer workshops during the summer. We've got a host of workshops coming up in August for 6th graders, 9th graders, 7th and 8th graders, so forth, and all these things we've talked about today: organization, planning, time management, so forth, writing, note-taking. And we also offer online coaching now, too, which is really cool, through this very system that Gretchen and I and all of you are using today, Google Hangout. So if you live at a distance from our office, you do not have to miss out on coaching services that may support your kids. So you can contact us. Again, it's SOS the number 4 students.com. Gretchen, thank you so much for involving me in this conversation today. I loved it. I was really delighted to be here.
I loved it too. It's so nice to connect with other people who are working on the same thing, and it's also it seems like the folks who were with us were really engaged with these questions. I hope maybe this semester we can do another one of these for the folks in our communities.
Definitely. No, it's a great service, and I love the questions that came in, and I think they're helpful for everybody. So thanks again.
Great. Well, take care, everyone. You'll be getting the recording within the hour, and thank you so much, Beth. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Good luck with the school year.